Oh, today we about to talk about unions. We're gonna talk about college jobs, and we just gonna catch up. So why don't y'all catch right on up with us? We'll be right back. Go. Hey, that's David. Omar is not with us today, but he will be back next week. And it has been a nice little holiday break. David, it's so good to see you, man. How are you, buddy? It's been a minute.
Hey, Dr. Cole, Charles, it's good to see you too. Definitely missed last week on the show. Let's see, been good. Last week, which was the holiday week, some people celebrate Thanksgiving, some people celebrate on Thanksgiving. Different people, different customs. We took a family trip out of the country, and actually we went to Mexico, where there's no hint of Thanksgiving. It's just another Thursday. Caught some of the World Cup action in Mexico. Unfortunately, Mexico was
Sorry, brother.
Mexico removed themselves from the World Cup. As a result of what had come down to like penalties. But yeah, got some time with the family. I hadn't been out of the country in a while. It's good to be back. Also, last week came down with the COVID, and so I'm recovering from that. And it turns out in my case, it was just a minor cold. It's kind of sustaining itself. You can probably hear it, but I feel good. The whole other story behind that, but it's good to be here. I'm glad to be back on the show. Glad to talk about today's topic, and definitely miss Omar. So we have a lot to catch up on. How are you doing?
Listen, when Omar comes back, his hair will be blacker. His skin will be more, be healthier. And Omar's just living his life, man. I'm always just
best life.
I love our brother Omar, man, and the beautiful life he gets to live. I'm good, man. I have been very busy. Like today, I'm gonna just have a real moment with you. I have like things that I'm not gonna have like a list, and like in between meetings, I have like an hour or something like that. I'm trying to write. My brain just has not worked today. It just won't work. And then I'm like, well, let me do the easy stuff. And my brain is just like, I'm done, bro. I don't know why what you're tapping into over here. It's not happening today. It's like when you watched Avengers Infinity War, and he was trying to get the Hulk to come out, and Hulk was like, no, I'm just not doing it. And so I've just been Bruce Banner without the brain power today. So
yeah,
but things have been cool. But I'm happy to see, man. I'm happy to see you. I'm happy. You and I did that work together around Brown-led charter networks from the Voices of Brown students, and I'm doing some other work, and it was coming up, and people were just giving kudos for that report, and just the way that it touched on different things, and it was really cool, man. So I thought about you, and I hope that you are proud of what we produced.
Definitely. We'll make sure to do a deeper dive on that report, the Brown report, in a future show. So I look forward to putting that together too.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So there's a few different things that we was going to talk about today, and I think you have brought something to the front. I'm familiar with the charter network, High Tech High, and apparently they're in the news for some reason. So why don't you fill us in, like nobody here knows what's going on, and then we can take off from there.
Yeah. Okay. So let's jump in. So I actually have personal connections to in a number of personal and professional connections to the High Tech High network. And earlier this week, I caught wind of a story around the charter network, which is based in San Diego, and some of the challenges that they're having around their process of negotiating with a newly formed collective bargaining unit, so a union, right? And they've reached an impasse. So we'll get into some of the nuts and bolts of that, but I thought this was a relevant topic because I don't know if it has anything to do with some of the recent movements that we've seen and COVID, but we definitely seem to be living in this moment of a labor movement. We had this big, several. Amazon, Starbucks, a lot of public sector, workers, as well as what we just saw the other day with Congress and Biden intervening in what could have potentially have been a national strike that would have impacted the movement of goods and services across our railways, right? So like labor is definitely like activated in 2022. I'm not going to say that it's a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's different depending on your perspective on the industry. So then I see this piece around high tech high, and in my mind always goes to like what's happening in and around like public charter schools and unionizing. Obviously, this is a California school. It's a California network. Different states have different regulations and laws around unions in general. So I think today we'll probably talk mostly about California because that's what we're most familiar with. Not an expert in the subject, but I've done some research, and I've also worked in public charter schools as both a teacher and a school leader, kind of dancing around a lot of these issues. I've also belonged to 3 different labor unions. Maybe you didn't know that, but I've been part of a teachers union. I've been part of a labor union that represented truck and forklift drivers, warehouse union. And I've also was short-term part of a union that represented bicycle delivery services in San Francisco. I was a bike messenger, so I was actually part of a bike messenger union, and I have very interesting stories from all 3 of them. So I have that perspective, and I wanted to bring forward this topic. And yeah, so you ready to jump in? Do you have anything you want to put out there up front, or should we just kind of go in?
Well, I guess I guess what we're talking about it, just like the general details of like what is kind of happening, and I think that there is also just, we'd be remiss to say, I know that people are trying to deny that there is that we are currently, our market is just down, right? That we're in a recession, and I think there's a lot of people that are saying it's not a recession. And I've just been watching these major companies have layoffs. Like, I don't think this is fully connected, but I do think there's a dotted line here. And I think that this will kind of play into future negotiations for charter schools that want to unionize. But let's see, Meta, Facebook has laid off 11,000. Amazon has let go 10,000 before the holiday season, right? This is before the holiday season. H&M, it's not just tech. H&M let go of 1,500 people. Coinbase let go of 1,000 people, and the list kind of goes on and on. Like these rounds of layoffs. Like, the one thing about when you live in a capitalist society, that there are peaks and there are valleys. There are bull and bear markets, and like our market right now is in a valley. And so when you're talking about the negotiations that were happening with the railways and those workers and the government stepping in and like some of the most liberal people in that place kind of being like, can't let this happen. I'm sorry. Like, we're going to say these things publicly, but in the back door, we're going to quench we're going to quench these demands. And now we go into your story around, okay, we're this chartered system. We want to unionize, but then you say there's an impasse. So what's the issue, man? Tell us.
Yeah, for sure. And so one other piece, we saw what happened with Twitter, right? And Elon Musk basically terminating like almost half of the company, right?
Right.
And the thing that you're seeing there, like, people get laid off all the time, right? For cause, not for cause. But there's a particular way it's written into contracts, how you lay people off.
Right.
And when you start violating the basic rights of workers, that's where you really start to see these issues pop up, right? And so I think with the change in the economy that we are experiencing today, which no one can deny, regardless of where you sit politically, at least the tech sector, there's a significant downsizing, a realignment, call it what you want. I don't know if that that's not going to necessarily impact jobs and education, but it does have an impact to the labor movement as a whole, which, organized labor that deals in the public spaces are part of, teacher unions particularly. So so what we're talking about today is a charter network in San Diego, California, called High Tech High. It started out as like one school, maybe two schools, and it's grown over time. They actually had schools in the Bay Area for a while, but then realized that was like too far from home, so they downsized back to just running schools in San Diego County, I believe. And at some point in time, I mean, unless unless you sit down at the very beginning process of creating a charter, and this is something that some people do, like I want to create a charter school in California, and we're going to start out with a teacher union, right? We're going to start that way. That's part of our value system. That's been done, right? But more often than not, what happens is a charter system, a charter school is operating in their 5th year, 10th year, 15th year, and something happens, something's in the water. In some way, shape, or form, teachers or staff feel like management is not being fair, is not being transparent. Maybe they fired popular teachers, or something's going on with the salary scale, or we've lost benefits, and it causes people to start talking, and eventually potentially getting to the point where teachers feel like they need to have better representation, right? And that's where they start talking about forming a collective bargaining unit, right, within a charter school, right? And this is what's happening at High Tech High. And so essentially you have a nonprofit. Nonprofits run charter schools. They're not for profit in California. And sometimes the home offices, even of the big networks, are not very well resourced. And then you have to take on, essentially, when you enter into this kind of a process where you're working towards a contract with a collective bargaining unit, it's like entering into a lawsuit, right? And it's expensive. You've got to hire attorneys, and it does suck up a lot of the bandwidth, which would otherwise be spent on ensuring that students are well cared for and that they're learning and thriving. Not to say the two things aren't connected. However, I don't know what the background is with this high tech situation, but at some point in form, the ball got rolling. And once the ball gets rolling, it's generally pretty easy for teachers to sign cards and get a majority to begin the process. And so they're in that process and working to negotiate a contract. And an impasse means, like, at the initial steps, they're unable to come to an agreement. And there tend to be like particular things, and they tend to be pretty consistent across the board. We talked about it before the show started, but the most contentious items where people have a hard time coming to an agreement on regarding collective bargaining agreements is the right to terminate employees, right? This is one of the key autonomies that charter schools have. You hire to your mission, you hire to your needs, you expect employees to perform, you provide them with resources. And if they're not performing, if they're not meeting expectations that are clearly laid out, and you have an evaluation process in place and people are not meeting the mark, people lose jobs. It happens all the time in any kind of industry. And it doesn't happen enough in the education space, I'll tell you that. And so one of the last things that management is trying to hold on to is the right to have the last say in firing, right? And then what mediation looks like. If you lose your job, is there an appeal process, right? I don't know if a lot of people were getting fired and terminated and they felt it was unfair. That's why it's a thing. But that's essentially where they're stuck, And I will say, one of the benefits and one of the key autonomies to charter schools, and without it is highly problematic, again, is the right to hire and fire, right? To build the team that really supports the mission and the vision of the school. Without that, you're really watered down, right? And it becomes highly problematic to achieve the results that you need to meet your mission. So that's where they're at. I'll leave it there, and then we can
No,
continue
I
on.
think,
But I wanted to get your thoughts. Yeah.
yeah, I absolutely want to get my thoughts. I think that, let me just get this straight, not to just repeat what you just said, but basically they're in these negotiations, they're going swimmingly. And then here's the issue. The issue is, hey, we want to make sure that we maintain this level of quality as far as education is concerned. So we want to be able to fire teachers as part of the perks of being a charter school or whatnot. And at the table, the other side is saying absolutely not. That is not something we want to give up. Basically, will be this long arbitration process. And what it makes me think of is a few years ago when I learned about the rubber rooms in New York. I don't know if people are familiar with the rubber rooms. Are you familiar with the rubber room?
Yes.
Yeah. And well, David, it might be actually more appropriate for you to explain what the rubber room is, but it makes me worry about the rubber room problem of traditional public education.
It's like a horror movie. I mean, somebody needs to make that, or maybe just go in and film it. So, I don't know if this is still happening. I assume it is. Maybe they don't do it in the way that they used to because of COVID. But the way that, some of these teacher contracts are written, like I may not be able to terminate employee X, right? For whatever they may have done. And in some cases, it's pretty serious stuff. Like you physically touched a child, or, you went on some kind of profanity laced rant in your classroom, or you can't show up to work, or you show up inebriated, right? All valid things in any logical world would get you fired from a job. But with some of these contracts, it makes it so litigious to almost impossible to terminate teachers.
It's just cheaper to put you in a room.
They create a place where you still get your pay, you still get your benefits, and you have to show up to some random, building that's owned by the district and sit in an office all day with other teachers that have been removed from their assignments but are still on the payroll. Like we're going to pay you.
So this is like teacher detention. There's paid,
man.
And wait a second, and y'all have there's paid teacher detention. Like that's better than regular detention because at least they still get paid. Oh my goodness! I would go write a novel.
I did telemarketing at the same time, getting paid double. And it's like you're on the payroll, you get your benefits, but we just don't think you should be around children. So that's a real thing. That sounds like it's kind of way out there. We're making it up. We're not. People can look it up. Yeah.
So wait a second. So you can like I would write the Great American Novel on like New York State's like dime. Like what are we talking about?
Yeah.
So when I hear that impasse, and here I want to be very clear about this, right? Because I think when in this education conversation and unions come up as a general topic, I like unions. I think that they are important to the bedrock of the country for a bunch of different reasons. I read The Jungle like a lot of people did when they were younger. I'm Black. Yeah. I've had parents who have lost jobs or whatnot, but I also think that if you're going to tell those histories, like there's also a racist history with unions. A lot of those unions were built in many ways to keep people that look like my great-grandparents and your great-grandparents, from taking certain jobs from people is rooted in racism, the way that a lot of things are in this country, good and bad, right? You know what I mean? So I want to just put that out there. I think that there is a need for unions in certain circumstances and situations. And I also think that there are markets and opportunities. And I think that I can also take things on a case-by-case basis. If the factor that is allowing me to educate better, go harder, have people that want to do this job, not just by seniority, but that are energetic and want to be involved and engaged. You know what I mean? I think that it's like there's a level. Let me just speak for me. I think that like if I started a company and you told me that I can't fire somebody that I started in my company, I'd have an issue with that. You know what I'm saying? And I think that that's so when we're talking about this conversation, if we're talking about the quality of education for young people, and I don't know if anybody's done a study of how good was the school doing, and then they unionize, and then how good was the school doing? Because we'll say kids are failing or kids are scoring lower, you know what I'm saying, as opposed to saying systems are failing or schools are failing those kids or adults are failing those young people. So this high school high thing, I mean, I think it's an issue that's larger than them. And I think also my last point, my last of my long-winded point here, David, is to the union people. Let me give you this advice, right? And I know you feel like you got to keep your throat on their necks because you're getting some momentum and you don't want to lose it. But there are charter networks that are like succumbing, that are wanting and willing to unionize with you. I think Ray had talked about this before. Like, they're open to it. Like, I don't think you want to, like, the people that's trying to work with you, I don't think you want to like squeeze their necks in front of everybody. I think, because it's going to make the people that did not want to do that for these reasons even much more evangelical about never going that route. So it was interesting to me when you brought that up.
And so a couple of other points on this piece too. This is one I don't want to leave without discussing. So one of the critiques of High Tech High, and obviously this is a much larger national conversation, which we need to have right now, is around teacher retention, right? Teachers are leaving. We need to hire new teachers. We want to hire more Black teachers. We want to hire more brown teachers. What does teacher retention look like? So this particular network had a rather high, a lower rate of teacher retention. So they were moving through teachers faster than even some of the charter networks in the area, and definitely faster than the local districts, right? The average age of the teacher was younger as well. And so you have less experienced teachers. So one reason that is problematic, just to look at the single number of teacher retention, is because in large school districts, like, teachers are not necessarily like terminated because kids aren't learning in their classroom. Kids cannot be learning in the classroom. And and you can look at all kinds of different objective measures, and teachers don't lose their jobs. You are naturally going to have a higher rate of teacher retention in district schools because it is harder and way more complicated and way more litigious to remove teachers that probably shouldn't be working with children. So of course the numbers are going to be inflated. A lower percentage of teacher retention might actually mean that you're doing the work of evaluating teachers, awarding good teachers, and moving out teachers that aren't a good fit for your organization. So it's one number, but the way that number is measured and everything that's behind it, the mathematics are very different. And so I just don't think it's a very fair metric to be looking at. 100% teacher retention is almost the same as saying, 100% of our kids got into college. But how many of them should have gotten into college? How many of them are going to succeed in college?
How many of them are going to be able to persevere? How many of them are going to, like, be, because, like, again, I graduated 383 from my high school, got into college, remedial everything. So I think that, like, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but because I think that it is I think we're doing something that we're adding a nuance that a lot of people tend to not have.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's usually very cut and dry.
Exactly. And so, 100% retention can just mean, like, you're a lazy administrator and you don't have any power or tools and everybody gets their job back, right? But you can have a low performing, school or student population. So that number is really worthless, right? You're at that point, you are a jobs program. You're not really about, like, serving children or the community. So when you see, oftentimes, and when I would come into a school in some of my principal roles, especially if a school is already up and running, and I would come in kind of as sort of in a turnaround situation, that first and second year, we'd have a pretty high turnover rate by design because I'm moving people out. And then you move people in, and then that number over the next year and third year gets up towards 90%. It's by design, but you don't want to start off with 100% because everybody doesn't get to keep their job unless, good things are happening. And you're not looking for a turnaround principle if good things are happening, right? So these numbers can be used to fit a number of different narratives. I wish them the best. I know it can be very divisive for the community too, because if you're a parent, you're hearing particular things about management and the board of this charter and the CEO, and there's a lot of misinformation. I just know it can be very, very challenging. So I hope,
that's tough.
And actually, one of my I have family that teach in that school, that network, And I haven't talked to her about it yet, but I will at some point. But yeah, I hope everything works out for the best.
I mean, listen, if you want to have a top-notch, product and service that you're delivering to people, you got to make sure you got the right people on board. And sometimes the people that you hire are not always the right people. And I think that private companies, you mentioned Twitter. A funny thing that people are not realizing about Twitter is that when they forced Elon Musk to go through with the purchase and he paid that money and got that receipt, he immediately took the company from being public to back private, so that he can make whatever decisions he wanted to make. And he still is gonna, still litigious around how some of those people might have been let go or not, or whatever the case is. But there's a reason why he took it back private. And I think that that's the thing, right? When you want to if you want to be a public entity or a private entity, or what type of classification you want to have as far as your job. But there are multiple things that is hard to exist in one space. And also shout out to our Roku viewers, shout out to our social media people. Thank you for joining us. Please share and keep those comments coming so we can be in conversation with you. But back to this point, if you're saying, listen, my kid has not been learning, I want the best for my kid. We need this and we need that. And this should look like this and it should look like that. And then it's like, okay, well, cool. We've done an assessment of where our educators are, and a lot of them are not up to snuff. We're going to make some changes. We're going to get some people that's hungry and that's coachable. Then it's like, well, not like that, right? And it's like, well, I mean, in what way? I think that there is, there's a give and take in these things. I don't know the details. I don't know what's going on in that room. I don't know what was said. I don't know who's necessarily right or wrong, but from, a 50,000 foot view just on the topic in and of itself, if that's what you think needs to happen, I did a video a while ago, and I didn't remember that I even did it, but it got posted and it got a little popular. And when Brown versus Board of Education happened, and it was under the guise of these separate but equal is not fair, and which I agree with. So it's like, well, we're gonna ship these black kids out to these white schools. And I've always just said, and I remember one of the people from the case pondering this later on, but I fully agree, and I've said this since. If it was really about the kids' education, if it was really about that quality, and you felt that those educators were going to just, enhance that for them, why move the kids? Why not move teachers? Why
exactly
a school of 500 students instead of bringing, 25 teachers or 25 or other resources into those places? And these are things that they're clouded, and they are wrapped in public good. They are wrapped in good intentions. They are truly wrapped in there. But then there are consequences that you don't always account for, or you could leave below the surface, and it's kind of like, well, we got to make this decision, but how do we make this decision still serve us and what it is that we need? Because here's the thing that will happen. That charter school that is actually operating at a decent level, probably better than a lot of its competition, if you take those certain things away, they will not be operating as good. And then you know what will happen? 5 years from now, you'll get reports that say, well, charter schools ain't no better than this traditional school. Well, it's like, because you cut it off at the legs, but you're going to leave that part out of the conversation.
And you know what else is going to happen? So this is the other thing, and I talk about this frequently, and I want to make sure everybody's listening. I think one of the biggest dangers to the charter school movement, in particular states where we see charters going through a process of unionization, is not the process of unionization, right? However, it is, when you add those levels of bureaucracy to what was a more autonomous and efficient system, you tend to get results that play out in the larger system, which we are obviously trying to operate outside of, right? Then come renewal time, right? And we've seen this. I've seen this in Oakland. I've seen this in Los Angeles. I've seen this in San Diego. I've seen it in Sacramento. Once you've unionized, the union has a responsibility to provide employment for its employees and to provide stable employment. Unionized charters are going to be much less likely to go through the closure process if they're not meeting particular indicators, right? Charters are not meant to stay alive forever. They have a 5-year cycle in California. And when you get to that 5-year point, if you're not meeting your mission, if you're not hitting your outcomes, you close.
You're gone.
That's what they're designed to do. They're not designed to exist in perpetuity like the district schools. But when you're unionized, all of a sudden it becomes an issue because you're talking about actually eliminating union jobs.
Mm-hmm.
That's an issue. That's a challenge and something that I think we're going to have to like look out for. And then going back to your question around Brown, it's something that we see in a lot of systems too. It's like the unintended consequences of seniority, right? So even within, not talking about charter schools, but like some of the unintended consequences of, it's like basically like redlining within a school district, like LA or San Diego or Oakland. Seniority, teachers with more seniority can have a broader choice of where they want to teach and where they get to stay. And so what you see are more experienced teachers that are teaching in schools on average with lower free and reduced poverty rates. So I want to go, maybe it's the more years you teach, you want to go live in the hills, you go teach in the hills, right?
Right.
And in the heartlands, in the more challenging areas with higher Black and brown SPED numbers and higher percentages of students with that come from low income families and backgrounds, you have newer teachers. So this exists even within the macrocosm of the school district, which is, I don't know if it's unintended consequence or by design for particular people. It's a reward. The longer you've been in the system, the cushier job you get to keep. I don't know if that's an unintended consequence, my friend.
I mean, I think I think it's nice for us to say unintended consequence, to be honest with you. I think that I don't know if these things sometimes they might have some diabolical nature to them. I will say, just looking in this case, I want to be very clear, and I've said this before. I don't care what type of school you want to send your kid to. I don't care if you choose a charter, a traditional school, a private school, homeschooling. I really think that's a personal decision. I really think that's your business. And I think that what is important as education is, far be it from me to, in my position of power and privilege, to tell David Castillo what type of school his kids can go to. But yet and still, I've worked in this system and I've watched people come down from those hills and talk to Black and brown people and tell them that they should not send their kid to X school or Y school without knowing those people's kids. I think that if you're going for quality and you're going for the best, like, it's so funny, man, because I love the smoke that charter schools get. And unaccredited nuns have been unaccredited nuns have been killing the game with no problem for however many, I don't know how many rulers have been on knuckles. Listen, man, I am Baptist, man. I'm Black Baptist. Do you know how many Black Baptists send their kids to private Catholic schools? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just ain't a teacher accreditation in sight. What I'm saying is we never ask these questions. We never ask these questions, right? So I don't care where you send your kid. I do think that I just want you as a public. I want you as a public to understand what a union's job is and what this operator's job is. I want you as a public to understand that there's going to be a hyperbolic argument and request on one side that's going to be met with another hyperbolic, like maybe overdone request on the other side. And then they're going to negotiate and they're going to make it seem like it's the worst thing in the world either way. And somewhere along the line, they'll find a way in the middle. There's going to be impasses at time. They're going to work around it. The only reason I'm even saying this is because education is very different than watching the NBA or the MLB strike on television. And I've watched parents and students get wrapped up and caught up into like the narrative that was being built around why we're striking, what we have to have and what needs to happen. And those people are not always aware of like all the dynamics that's at play. And people kind of prey on that. So I just want you to be informed wherever you land on this issue, wherever it happens. I just want to, that's what the job of this podcast is for us to give you the details so you can make whatever decision you want, or you can support whatever you want. You don't have to agree with me or David. We don't always even agree with each other. The point is that you're informed and you know what's happening, because here's the flip side of this. And it's going to go into one of our next topics. Now, classes. So at UC Berkeley, well, not just UC Berkeley, but a lot of UC campuses across California, what's currently happening right now, David, is student workers have just decided to go on strike. They decided to stop working. And let me tell you, it's not just because they're lazy. It's not because they're Gen Y or Z or early or you know, younger millennials or whatever. That's not the case. What is happening is that these are grad students. These are people that are doing doctorate degrees, doctoral degrees, and you work on campus. So when you do normally when you do like a traditional PhD, you're normally fully enthralled into that university.
Yep.
I did a different program and I was working. I was doing a whole bunch of stuff. I didn't go to UC. I did a California State. I did a CSU for my professional doctoral degree, right, which ended up being the EDD. But it was built to where I could still work and live my life. But in a lot of other programs, you are fully enthralled. And some of these people in California are getting salaries that I think said $23,000, $24,000 a year. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know where you live.
It's criminal, man. It's criminal.
I don't know where you live. And listen, it's not everywhere, right? But in California, especially in the Bay Area, especially if you're a student that goes to UC Berkeley, or you live in LA and go to UCLA, or you go to UC San Diego or whatever, it's just, even with whatever the university is providing, it's not going to offset the need for more money. Now, I want to also just say, like, if I fought this. I'll find the article and post it. I'll send it to you, David. But I was one of the main protesters at CSU around our fee hikes, and I actually was part of the crew that got a lot of those brand new buildings built at CSU Hayward, and you know, had my bouts and fights with the now deceased former president Norma Reese, and God bless her soul. We have some classic battles, and so I feel this on a personal level. But here's the larger issue that we want you all to understand. Again, a flip side of what we just saw with the high school high situation, depending on what your lens is. If fees are rising, if tuition is rising, if we are in a recession and the price of milk is almost doubling, and we are and everything around me is rising, but the rate of pay at my workforce job or my university job is staying the same or not rising at the same level, then I can't survive. I can't be here. I got to go do some extra stuff. I got to be up and I got to work. And then you got kids that's going to be on Adderall and a whole bunch of different things trying to do a bunch of stuff. And so they've decided to take action. And that action has been mighty and loud. I don't know what's going to happen. 48,000 student workers have decided to walk out. And I also probably should disclose that I'm stepping away or whatnot, but I've been a board member for UCSF Benioff Children's Hospital for a while, man, 5 years, 6 years. We oversee somewhat of it's like $4 billion in healthcare stuff. But because there's the fiduciary board that I'm part of for Oakland or whatnot, and then there is, you know, is now merged with the UC system. The UC regents, this is something that's probably at their doorstep that they're kind of having to deal with. I didn't want to be doing this and not necessarily disclose. I don't have no power over there. I don't know what's going on with that. People have always been nice to me or whatever the case is. But the point is that the UC system, CSU system, California universities in general have not been a stranger to these type of controversies for a while, because it was an issue when I was a student, and we marched and we protested for it. So what is your thought process on this, David? Like, you know, these kids are they're not kids. Some of them are our age because it's doctoral students. Yeah. It's mostly doctoral students, but not mostly. I don't want to say that, but it's a lot of doctoral students and masters and stuff like that. But you know, they're going to get painted probably a certain kind of way, you know, whatever the case is. What do you think should be happening? And I have not yet named the UC system's budget yet. So
yeah, I mean, I think number one, it's a shame that we've gotten to this point where UC and CSU workers feel the need to walk away from students. That's unfortunate. Not casting blame anywhere, but like that's not a good place to be. I think number two, I am the product of all three systems of California's community college system, of the California State University system, as well as the University of California system. I've attended all three. And I'll tell you what, I mean, the tuition when I was attending these programs was nothing compared to what it is today. It's like tripled, it's
Yeah.
quadrupled, if not more, Charles. And so my big question is, and I understand cost of living, inflation. A lot of our campuses have grown, but that means more tuition. You have the mix of the much higher rates of attendance for international students and non-California residents. So for me, it boils down to a financial budget transparency issue. Like where is the money going essentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think something is broken in the system. There's no way we should be paying graduate students, doctoral students, the money that we are paying them to do the work that they're doing. It's criminal, right? Even if you give them free housing and all this other stuff, it's criminal, especially in 2022 California's economy. And so I think these are big systems. All three of our California college systems are huge. This UC being the biggest, CSU in terms of budget. And so I think there's some hard work to do around unpacking the finances. I don't know if the governor needs to get involved, the legislature, but it feels like with the combination of like state funding, that so the schools receive state funding also, and tuition, right? And so like,
Oh
really,
yeah.
my question is like, what's happening with all of this money? It's not
Well,
like
how
public
much do you how
education.
much did you guess the budget is?
Oh man, I have no idea.
Oh, you
But
oh,
what I was gonna say is like when we look at K-12,
here you go.
we pay taxes, but we don't pay tuition to attend public K-12.
Right.
People are paying tuition to attend our colleges and universities. And so in addition to the state funding. So what do we have here?
The budget for 21-22 is $44 billion.
Oh my goodness.
It was 44 billion, and I think it's going up this year.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
man.
44 billion
like what,
with a B.
yeah. Yeah. Can you pull the full graphic up? Just pull it up a little bit so we can see. So core funds, general. So general is like state funding, tuition.
I come in around this area. I'm in this
man, yeah.
in that area.
That's crazy, And so like how I hate to say it, but maybe it's a system that's gotten too top heavy with administration. Perhaps it's a system that's gotten just too top heavy in terms of, the more employees you hire, the more people you have on payroll, that just waters everything down. And so maybe we need to reevaluate the entire system. So
maybe, right?
I don't know.
Have you read the master plan?
I haven't.
It's one of the most beautifully written things I've ever read. And basically it was, this was hippie California at its finest, right? This was like, every type of university in California, it was talking about its master plan for like our public education, and then the role that community colleges were going to play, and it was always going to be free, and the role that CSUs were going to play around helping like get the workforce ready, and then UCs were going to be kind of like our research and make us lead to like a better world, and all of it was going to be free or very, very, very cheap at best. And these ideals, like it's such a beautifully written joint. I could try to pull it up, but the point is that we've gotten very, very far away from that, and at the same time we are not the leader that we used to be. Like look, you can find whatever reports you want, like that UC Berkeley in some polls is still the top public university in the world, depending on what you're looking at. And like I think a lot of great things come out of there, and at the same time I think that there's a lot of other countries that are now eating our lunch just around physics and math and you know what I'm saying, and sciences and data and research and all of those things. And I just feel like if we're spending more money, like I'm gonna take it back to 5th grade, right? Like if we're spending more money and things are getting worse, like it's just not how this is supposed to go.
It's a definition of insanity, right?
It's the cousin of it. I know insanity is doing the same thing over and over and accepting different results. This is worse than insanity. This is saying that you're doing the same thing and there's a decline. Like there's not, like, at least with insanity, it's the same thing happening. This is a decline, man.
I
So
agree.
we need a new
I
term.
agree. And these, I mean, I mean, that's one of the flagships of the state of California is our public education system, which includes our public university system, right? And you nailed
Mhm.
it. It's like the community college system is like the gateway. The CSU system is kind of the technical training. It's like where we're going to
Yeah.
train our
Get to the
teachers
work.
and our
Mhm.
public workers, and our UC system is going to be our research centers and our medical systems, and it all drives our economy, right? It's wonderful on paper, but at some point, like, something went wrong. And I know, like, I don't want to compare us to countries like Sweden or this or that, which people often
Right.
do. However, I will say in so many other countries, public education all the way through college is like free, and it's really good. And I just don't know why we can't figure out how to do that here. They're finally offering like free community college in particular areas in the state of California. But it just seems like something in the CSU water and the UC water is not, something's wrong. And tying it back to, I don't know if this is true, so I'm not gonna, I'm just gonna say one thing that I believe that we do need to look at, Charles, is um, perhaps the impact of, we have to look at our employment, the employment like ratios, like how many workers do we have in the system, right? That aren't necessarily facing students, right? So the UC is just not education. I mean, they have a ton of other services underneath that help the system to function on a daily basis. And so, and all those workers um, are covered and represented by different unions, right? And
Mhm.
now we're back to the same point. Like, is this what we're really dealing with here? A system that is too top heavy with employees and management, and we got to like pull back on all of it. I'm not sure, but something is really off. And unfortunately, I mean, if I were a first generation student, or if my child was in college right now, and I'm paying tuition, it would just be a shame to have them like be paying all that tuition, going into some kind of debt, and then not have teachers on the other end, right?
Right. I mean, I agree, man. I'm gonna send you the original. I'm gonna post it real quick. I dropped it. It's long. There's much
Yeah,
easier ones to
yeah,
read, but I feel like for my friend, uh, my buddy and my friend who I tend to do research with, David. I feel like you should have the big file. I feel like you should.
yeah. That's it right
He-
there. Okay, good. I got it.
oh yeah, and here's what it looks like for those that may not want to have to necessarily deal with this. We'll give you the other version of this as well. But
Yeah, this is like Pat Brown, Jerry Brown's California. Here we
I
go.
mean, but it broke down. I mean, this is like, this was like typewriter stuff back in the day, man. But it was,
Yeah,
it was
man.
an idea. It was something that was built on
It's a
ideas, and
concept,
people
man.
decided to, yeah, man, and people decided to do what they were
It
gonna
was like
do around with it,
it
and
was like it was visionary, right?
it was, and I mean,
Like around that same time, like Disneyland was visionary, right? This perfect society with all these,
hey
you
man, but
know.
some people are able to make those things happen. I want to
Yes.
even show one other thing because I want people to get their history from us today.
Yeah.
Like, because there was a plan around who would be taken into UCs and who would be taken into CSUs and who would go into the community colleges, right? Because community colleges was supposed to be like the epicenter of like everything that you do with your hands. So it's like construction workers and like you
Brown
know
hands, black
hey man,
hands.
you know what I'm saying? Like it was like, but our workforce, it was
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
one of the most important pieces because that's what a majority of people were always meant to be. They were
Yep.
always meant to be there. I'm gonna pull it up for you though, man, because it was I think this might be it right here. Let me see if I can get us up here. And for the people watching, bear with us. I think this is something that you're gonna want to see as well. So the California master plan, let me make it bigger.
Yeah.
So here's what it was supposed to be. I'm gonna make it as big as I can. So the establishment principle of universal access and choice and differentiation of admissions pools for the segment. UC was to select from among the top 1/8, 12.5% of the high school graduating class.
Yeah.
CSU was to select from among the top 1/3, 33.3% of high school graduating class, and our California community colleges were to admit any student capable of benefiting from instruction. And they had these plans of how they kind of worked into each other. You should really read it, man. It's really, really interesting. And I think that what happens is when you kind of get away from a plan, and things start to kind of shift and grow, but you don't check for everything in it. This is the stuff that you get. So whether we're talking about high school high and we're talking about the issue around, you know, their impasse there, or what's actually happening with student workers on these campuses where, you know, it is the quality has become lower, the instruction, and some of this stuff, I mean, on the instruction end, listen, man, there's a flock of students right now where things are actually different. I don't know if you saw that report where this world-renowned kind of math educator, he's like a physicist or so, I forget, he's like 70 something, and the kids couldn't pass his class, and he was just like, physics hasn't changed. I don't know what you like. I hear you, I understand, and they like let him go, right? And he's just like, I'm fine. Like he's like, I'm not gonna do this, right? Like there's something happening.
Is college or high school?
College, man. This is at a university. It's like they're like MIT is not MIT in it right now. You know what I mean? And I think and here's what I'm gonna say. Far be it from me. I'm not the smartest guy. I'm not moral oral. I don't want to be a role model. I mess up all the time. I want to just say that because I'm not about to cast aspersions, but people like to say, well, you can't do this. Listen to what I'm telling you though, right? We are in a global market and global economy. And for a long time, we had, you know, we still do, but have some of the smartest people, like, and we were brewing and building more of those smart people. And I think that we have watered down our education so much to make people feel accepted, to feel good, or whatever the case is. I am all for us growing as a society and making sure we are more inclusive. What I'm saying does not take away from that. We still have to have a very, very high bar because we are a part of a society and we are a part of a system where we've been number one, or at least at the top, near number one for a long time. And once you're not that anymore, it can get rough and it can get tough. And I just think that I just think that this is a reckoning we've done a reckoning today, David, for how these union folks need to be thinking about stuff, how these workers need to be thinking about stuff. And now I'm finishing my piece with how us as a public need to be thinking about stuff. You can hold multiple thoughts in your head at once. You can say, I love unions. But the details and particulars of this case seem a little ridiculous. You can have your values and still also, like, you know, look at like the numbers game that might be playing out that may or may not be in your favor. We have to become a smarter, less emotional, but like more like goal-oriented, like just nation. I don't know how else to say it. Like we have to get to that place. And you know, listen, man, the World Cup is on right now and the world is watching it, and there's a lot of politics and geopolitics that are playing out and happening in that. But at the end of the day, there's going to be a winner and there's going to be a loser. And in life, everything isn't binary like this, but some things still are. There are winners and there are losers. And so, you know,
some people already got sent home.
Hey, because in the real world, you get sent home, man. In the real world, you don't. That's like the Warriors. Everybody that applies for the Warriors gets to play. No, man. No. Listen, James Wiseman, I love you. You have so much potential, but you are not getting the ball in the basket. You have to go back to the G League. And if you don't perform in the G League, you will be out of the league. Russell Westbrook had to, you started, now you coming off the bench and you playing better. This is like, these are athletes playing at the top of their game. And as a country, I think that we were playing at the top of our game before. I don't know if we still are. And we still can be a less racist society. We still can try to right the ills that our country has stained on them. We still can try to be better. These are not either ors, right? This is like both ands. So that was my final thought. But why don't you take us home on a greatly produced show that you guided us through, brother?
Yeah, thank you. I think we ended up in a different place. Well, not a different place, but we never know where we're going to end up. I think we started out talking about, unions and charter schools and unions and education. Again, echoing your thoughts, I'm not anti-union. I'm not pro-union. I'm like, if you want to form a union, I think it's different when we think about unions in the private sector. Like if you work for Amazon, if you work for Walmart, if you work for Starbucks, if you work for a private corporation, you are likely to be exploited, right? And so therefore unions in so many cases make sense. My parents, I've talked about this a lot. My parents were farm workers before any kind of farm worker union existed. And the stories that my parents told me about working in the fields for pennies on the dollar, sleeping in tents in Arkansas and Michigan and Missouri in the winter in the snow, that's real. They had no union to protect them, and a union could have and should have protected them. In California, the United Farm Workers is still doing work to protect farm workers in California, the fifth largest economy in the world, right? So don't get it twisted, right? That's not what we're talking about. But I'm saying, like, we're talking about like white collar public sector unions. That's a different thing, right? It's a white collar public sector unions are a different thing. And so, once you get your working hours, your pay right, your benefits right, your working conditions right, then focus on the work, right? If you're a farm worker, your focus is on being safe, having a sustainable job, having work guarantee, and then producing good, healthy fruit. That's your job, right? If you are a teacher, so many of the same things exist. However, what is the end outcome? And I think we lose sight of that. And so today we're talking about the end goal is producing and helping to support the development of young children. And that can be and should be measured as a part of the entire package, right? So when we talk about labor unions in schools, whether they be public or charter, whatever they might be, we should never walk away from the end goal. And that's like demonstrably being able to say, hey, the children in our system are actually learning, they're growing, and they are progressing. It is about the adults, but in the end, it's actually about the children, right? And so that's really what we're talking about. And so I really appreciate this conversation today. It feels like I watching the headlines of the news over the last couple of days, and some of these pieces come over. I had something to say, and I'm glad I was able to say it today, and that you joined in. And I wish the best for everybody that's out there in the streets and pushing for fair contracts. But let's not lose sight of what it's about, and what we talk about on this show are educational and life opportunities for Black and Brown children, whether it be through K-12 or the college system, right? As long as we're focused on that, I'll fight for you till the end of the day, right?
Listen, man,
and so that's what it's about.
I'm with you. I think that I agree with you. And if we're talking about support, you all can definitely support us. It costs you nothing. Like, share, comment on this. Be part of the conversation. This is a community conversation around education that is built around you and for you. And so help us out with that. And we are nothing without the people that watch and listen to us. So to the people that's on everywhere from LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Roku. If you have Roku, we are on there as well. We just appreciate you, and we're grateful. Omar will be back with us next week. That's David. I am Charles, and we will see you all next week. Same bat time, same bat station. Peace out.
Peace.